The Third Side of the Coin, brought to you by XCaliber Coaching and Consulting.
Hey Tim, it's been a long time. How are you?
Great, Alex. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fantastic. So much has changed. We decided to postpone and delay some of the new episodes because we were preparing and gathering the content for our new business series, which I'll announce just in a second. But what is it that you've done lately? I've heard it was a huge project that you were working on.
Yes, I delivered a huge project called the European Impact Summit, which actually was a global summit on purpose and impact and how businesses can be an agent of change by providing projects or business outcomes for a lot of the aid agencies. We did a 3-day digital event on it, and it was good stuff. A lot of interesting things came out of it. It was innovative in delivery, but also in terms of content. You saw a lot of new content that's not available regularly. So it was a good outcome at the end.
That sounds fascinating. I'm quite grateful to be in your company because I learned quite a bit of new information from the line of work that you are involved in and very interested in the topics. And this is our new business series. We are calling it Next Steps for Success. And in this part one, business recovery, we will discuss different topics, mainly ranging on what exactly the businesses are going to have to expect and what's going on in the world. According to the research by Brookings that I've just read recently, the world economy is experiencing a tepid, uneven, and really fragile recovery from the depth of the latest COVID-19 global recession. And they're noting that China's economy is back on track and the United States appears to have turned the corner. They just actually announced the other week, perhaps it was even this week, that the global GDP is going up. So the fact of the matter is that you're seeing different reports. We're still seeing many economies plumb new depth. And with the second wave of COVID, we're also trying to kind of figure out where is it going to go, whether businesses are going to have to reclose or are they really on the path to recovery. And some industries such as world merchandise trade has rebounded strongly and consistently, and some pretty much are still kind of remained crippled, like hobbled by restrictions and consumer concerns. Even though that we're seeing quite a difference in the way different sectors are operating and rebounding, there is an uptick in some industries. And this morning, I just read an article that announced that major US employers like ExxonMobil, Raytheon, Charles Schwab, and Allstate are laying off thousands of white-collar employees. And that includes engineers and managers. And we're also seeing that C-suite confidence in economy recovery gradually coming up. And that's according to the recent survey that was done by the conference board. They surveyed over 1,100 US workers, and they found that 20% of individual contributors actually feel pressure to return to the workplace in order to keep their jobs. So even though the recovery appears to be happening for some, but not others, based on the news reported in the media, it also indicates that many individuals who are adversely impacted by this pandemic aren't recovering from the mental health perspective. On the contrary, it appears that the stress levels are rising and employees are carrying themselves in fear of uncertainty and ambiguity, and they bring all that to work. So with all this said, we're seeing a lot of conflicting information. And Tim, what I wanted to learn from you, and based on what it is you're seeing in your part of the world, and perhaps what it is that you've heard from the leaders, what is really going on in the business world right now? Do you feel that we have entered the recovery stage yet?
That's a great question, Alex. I mean, as Mark Twain popularized, there are three types of lies: lies, damn lies, and then statistics. So, so what we're seeing out there, we don't know whether they're true or not, but by the time we get the statistics, it's already way past, especially government statistics, but that's besides the point. What we're seeing now is something that's very unique. I mean, everyone is talking about an inflection point because institutions has failed, business has failed, and government has failed in responding to the pandemic. There needs to be global solidarity in moving forward, but in fact, we've seen the opposite. Everyone has withdrawn from global agreements. Well, not everyone, but there's questions on global agreements, and also everyone has now refocused back on their own countries or whatever in order to address the issues. And so they should. But having said that, this is a pandemic, and pandemic doesn't recognize borders. So if there's no coordination internationally, or the international agencies are being ridiculed, then forever you're not going to have what people are saying, a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery, a W-shaped recovery, whatever recovery you're talking about. It's very difficult because of the way we are integrated as a global economy, right? So the fear you're seeing are twofold. One is a classic fear that you get during a recession. If I lose my job, what's going to happen? Let's knuckle down and look busy. Okay, so maybe by looking busy, and in fact you might be busy, I might not be one of the few or the many that might be asked to seek new opportunities elsewhere. The second thing that is happening that no one could have predicted is the various type of lockdowns and the physical distancing that has come into place across the world. So yeah, as an individual, you're trying to manage both. One is, how do I keep my job because we're in a recession? Some say it's a depression. And I feel it is a depression because it's all fiscal stimulus now and not monetary. Because interest rates are not touched at all, so it's not monetary at all. It's fiscal, where all the stimulus packages are going in right now. And on the other side, you have, how do I manage the new realities at home? So the obligations between obligations where you are paid and obligations where you are not paid. And when both come together at the same time, it's a very difficult decision to make. So we're all hardwired in that money allows you to pivot and make changes. And so our understanding or our default mechanism sometimes is like, if I have my job, I keep my cash flow coming in, right? Then I can do many things that perhaps if I didn't have a cash flow, I wouldn't be able to do. Now, there's very reasons for that. One, it's our utility costs. I mean, it's just the cost of living. If you have a mortgage, you have loans and all that. So the first thing of that sense of survival has shifted from our survival of the fittest, like in a natural environment, and one of survival within a social strata that most of us live in. And that's what we're seeing, a complete polarity and the clash of it right now.
Yeah, I guess we're going into the possibility that Darwinists were right, survival of the fittest, to just put it at the very simple hierarchy of needs. Do I have enough to survive? If you were to look at some of the data, I'm going to use it anecdotally right now because I don't have facts to pull up. The bigger cities are seeing the increase in not just unemployment rates, but homeless rates. We're not necessarily in a position to confidently say that some industries are going to recover faster than others. We know there's ambiguity and uncertainty, and it just depends where you sit at the table right now, or whether you even have a seat at the table as an employee or contractor, basically as a worker. What are the major pain points that businesses are experiencing, and what can really prevent them from failing? Based on your personal experience and what you see being surrounded by very successful individuals, and I know we've chatted about it briefly, that a lot of businesses are trying to figure out how they can contribute to the future of humanity. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think 2 weeks ago during the summit, and it was confirmed there is business has a significant role to play now. And if they don't act now, it will be too late to make any changes in the world. I know I'm sounding doomsday, but the way if you put everything together, this is the time where we just need to make the change. Governments are not as effective in making the community change that we're looking for, and business, in the way things are working out, have more access to the community that they're around and where their business is located, have a greater chance of empowering people to make change or better themselves, as long as there's employment. Okay, so the question now is, what do business need to do? And what business need to do is, one, understand what their purpose is. And so it's no longer the Milton Friedman, and I think everyone meaning great journalists has written on this, is that the Milton Friedman model is broken and it's not working and not accepted anymore. That model is like the purpose of the business is to make money for the shareholders. Yes, there is still shareholder responsibility, but at the same time, it's moved from shareholder profit to stakeholder profit. And what does that mean? That means we're moving from supply chains to supply chain values. So what supply chain value means, different stakeholders now need to step up in the game of doing things either ethically or ways that are sustainable. So when we talk about sustainability, it's not just about cash flow and relevance to the market. It also comes into the greater discussion of biodiversity, such as polluting the environment, diversity and inclusion, health and wellness, and all that. Everything that makes you into a healthy and functioning human being, businesses are also responsible for. Now, the interesting thing is that millennials, and let's just call them below 30s, are now demanding this. And we're also seeing, we're kind of late baby boomers generation. The amount of money that we're circulating in the economy is far less than what the millennials be bringing in. Okay. Now, what that means for business now is that we need to start shifting and start addressing what the new generation is looking for. One is they're looking for business with purpose, business that are actually going to make some positive change in the community for both the individuals, but also for the greater good of the community we're in. The second is that whatever businesses do, it needs to have some impact, which means it goes beyond just the business itself. Now, as a business leader, then I'll start thinking, well, why do I have to do that? The taxes I pay and et cetera, shouldn't that go into essential services? We're looking at a partnership now of seeing where policymakers and businesses can actively work together and bring about growth in that way. So for me to recover now is one, it is a huge undertaking. One where am I prepared to see a temporary contraction in my profitability? I'm not saying that you're not going to become profitable, but eventually, but then within a few months, go back to your pre-impact days of profitability. And it is possible. Businesses are doing that. To shift the planning from a quarterly cycle to that of half yearly to yearly, because it's the quarterly cycle that is giving everyone the stress. And by doing quarterly cycles, you're only focusing on the short term without thinking about the long term. Now, the problem comes here is because of COVID. Because COVID, the second wave, third wave, fourth wave that's coming, is that disruptor that forces you to start planning in short term, because you're unable to plan longer term when there's disruption to labor, disruption to supplies and things like that. I think where we need to work towards is forget about a vaccine. Because it's like a flu vaccine. Every year it's a new one. So a vaccine like for polio and measles and mumps or German measles, they're around, but they're not curing, right? Even polio took us 50 years to get, was it polio or smallpox? I think smallpox. It took over 50 to 60 years for us to eradicate it in the world, supposedly, right? So equally for COVID, even if we get a vaccine, it is not going to be the solutions. And we have to stop thinking like that and start replanning in a way that allows us to function. That means like looking at other countries that has gone into the third and fourth wave and start seeing what they have done. Okay, I sort of also worship in an Anglo-Catholic Church or Episcopalian High Church of England. Right? So where I'm in Sydney, it's known as the Low Church or Evangelical, and the High Church that I'm used to worshiping in is a lot of rituals, and I like that because there's predictability and there's drama, but at the same time you can express your faith in a set way. We're not going to go into the pros and cons of it. So anyway, there's only 2 churches in the whole of the state I'm in. So because of the social distancing, we can't go worship, or it's limited. And thankfully, they're broadcasting it online. So I was watching it, and it was bizarre because there was the call and response, and you're responding by yourself in your own living room when you're watching it, when you usually expect that. So I thought, okay, great. Then I went to the cathedral that I worship in Hong Kong, watching that, and it was like normal, totally normal. I mean, there was a lot of things that changed, like you had to wear your mask. When you're taking the sacrament, it was not both, it was just one, it was just the bread. And there was a protocol in taking it. And they had social distancing, which was like, if you're in the same household, you could sit next to each other. If you're in a different household, you had to have 2 seats away. So you saw that, right? But what they also did was everyone had a form in front of them, which you had to fill in and hand it in so that they can trace you should someone later on be tested for COVID. So it was done in a way where it looked like a normal service and there was a sense of community. Then I called up my friends in Hong Kong and said, hey, what is it like? I hear that restaurants are closed, we're closed, gyms are closed. They're saying, life kept going. We just knew that we had to wear our masks, we kept our distance, and if you were sick, we did the right thing and we went and got tested. And the government then started moving from, when it got really bad, they moved from self-isolation at home to then mandatory isolation in the hospital or a facility. That's when it got to there was, I think, 100 in the whole community out of 8 million. That's when they said, okay, we have to have government quarantine, right? So what I'm saying here is we need to set in some protocols that everyone will subscribe to in order that life can get back to normal. The last thing you need are people who are not team players. So I'll give you an example. In Sydney right now, they're scrambling to trace diners at a restaurant. So when you go to restaurants in Sydney now, you have to QR scan yourself into the restaurant and put in your details so that if someone in that restaurant tests positive later on, they can trace you and tell you, you need to self-isolate.
So when you say that they have to fill out their personal information?
So filling out the details is your name, your telephone number, and number of diners with you. If everyone's doing their own stuff, it's not going to recover. It's a community transmission.
Right.
So I'm not saying that the government has to step in, lock everything down, but there needs to be a mechanism where if you've been in the same space where there is a spreader, right, you can then be knowledgeable to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Right? It's highly contagious. The symptoms are so many and different, and it might be mistaken for the common flu.
Yep.
Yeah. And the thing is that our health system globally is no longer equipped to deal with mass sickness, the lack of investment into the health system, right?
Yep.
So because of that, if the health system collapses, then it doesn't serve anyone. The problems that businesses now face is, how can I ensure that there's continuity within my business? So it's continuity was the very beginning where, oh my God, this is happening right now. And that's where everyone was doing a lot of things to keep my business going. okay, the business is going now. How do I recover from that? And now recovering from that is now, do we start doing a long-term plan? You're actually doing a parallel planning now. One short-term, right, which is your business recovery or continuity, and one longer term. Let's move together. So you're like on a railway track, you know, that one's one track, one's the other track, and you're going along, and you're just hoping that you don't derail, right? And you're
Well,
able to.
actually, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly because even if you look at standard business model, ultimately we still had within the business some sort of protocol. You know, there's strategic planning, long-term planning, and then, as you referred to earlier, there's the review, especially for the public companies. You know, there's those quarterly reviews and financial responsibility to the stakeholders. But the biggest change is what happens now and within the month. So I think the bigger attention needs to be paid to a monthly review and then go into the longer term view, simply because we can say ambiguity has always been there, but ultimately this is an outbreak of the worldwide proportion, and we've learned already. The reality is it's been the entire year. It started actually in 2019. And so seeing how rapid the change is, we're going to have a lot more vulnerability involved in the way the businesses need to kind of react. So us looking at the company like Raytheon, they're building airplanes. If the airline business or industry does not recover or does not get injected with extra stimulus, what's going to happen? They're probably going to have to reinvent.
Yeah, so that's a great segue to our great friend and brain trust, Dr. Lisa Cafferata. She gave us a quote about what she's seeing, and Lisa is not only one of the most impressive and brilliant learning design thinking professionals I know, but incredibly insightful on just stringing things along, of seeing just the parallel connections of very different silos or sectors or happenings in the world. So what did she say about the shift from the business to the individual? Because at the end of the day, who drives the business? It's the individual. And we keep talking about the business as an entity. Yes, it is an entity per se, right, on paper. But who drives or fuels the business are individuals, are people themselves.
Yeah, in the beginning, when I mentioned the fact that the stress levels are going up because people are sacrificing so much of what they thought their rights were, and quite a bit of humanity is actually sacrificing for the common good. Yes, there are going to be the groups and individuals that might not be doing that, but we need to look at the overall goodness that is out there. So Dr. Lisa, when we asked her a question of what is needed according to sources for business recoveries, and we basically wanted to get her personal perspective and her business knowledge, and she said that, and I quote, "The number one frame a leader must embrace as we enter 2021 is optimism. They need to radiate excitement, modeling for their teams how to embrace the ambiguity. They need to incite fun and playfulness while finding new opportunities in the gray." The three other points that she mentioned, she said, quoting, "Leaders must convene a community or coalition of collaborators around a clear purpose." Exactly what we just talked about it. We cannot operate in silos. Even though the borders are closed, we cannot progress unless we learn from each other, unless we talk to each other, whether it's on the business level or even as a community. She also brought up excellent points, saying that leaders must foster curiosity and creativity amongst their teams. What worked in the past will not work going forward. Convening a team to find endless solutions will not be the answer. The most important step in the creative process is the first one, surfacing questions and finding the right questions.
That's again another segue, bring it back to business. What she's mentioned there and what we've been talking about throughout the number of podcasts is the qualities of an entrepreneur. That's what we're talking about. And when you start hearing about curiosity, agility, stakeholder management, resilience, able to pivot and see what the new opportunities are. When you look at that, it's all about an entrepreneur, someone who's able to live in the moment and then do something about it and make something even greater from it. And so that goes back to also what the business can do within the community, of the purpose of the business and the power of the business of making change. So when we start looking at business recovery and the role of business, we start to see that it becomes an incredible pivot point for the world to use in moving forward, where business becomes a force for good. And the writing is on the wall. For a business to survive, and a lot of businesses are moving towards that direction, it must have purpose in the community. It must be creative. It also must create the inspiration for others to not only want to be part of it, but to see how they can contribute towards it. So if we look at the early days of Apple, the early days of Google, everyone wanted to be part of it because it was exciting. How do you recreate that excitement that we used to have in the world that we live in, as opposed to the doom and gloom that we're hearing right now? Where is the excitement that we're trying to drive? And so business recovery is all about excitement again, you know, and that excitement, whether it's for goods and services, whether it's for inputs of goods and services, needs to happen again. And the approach is the basic stuff of how you do business is planning short term, but thinking long term.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we finish talking about the recovery, because there's quite a lot to unpack, and that's why in our next episode, we're going to talk more specifically about business transformation stage, because ultimately we're going to have to need to have those businesses who are in the recovery stage, because we've determined clearly not every business is, but many who are would need to generate the excitement for a better life. We cannot continue being stagnant or stuck in the position where our leaders and employees, those whom they lead, are in the state of depression constantly, right? We need to make sure that there is belief in the future. And I think it's our innate belief and ability as humans to turn towards the optimism versus, of course, we're going to have pessimism, and with all the fear mongering, it's probably going to continue for quite a while, unless the entire community of humanity decides to stop this. But just the last question, and it's mostly just your opinion: is the world going to, or potentially turning towards spirituality or away from it?
I think it's turning towards spirituality. And what I mean by that, I don't mean turning towards organized religion, but turning towards what is my purpose in life? What is my purpose, or what is the purpose of life? What is my purpose of life? And what is the purpose of other people around me? And it's the deeper questions of who am I that's coming up. So it is an interesting time. It is a confusing time for many who have never walked that path, and we're juggling a lot. We're dealing with having to share the house with my husband or wife or partner. That's usually hi, bye, I'll see you later. And on top of that, you've got your pets, you've got your children. It's like, get me out of here. Thankfully,
Yes, the lifestyles are definitely changing, and
That's
with
right.
that, the emotional stability and
Oh yeah.
wellness. And I do believe that you're right. And by the way, for our listeners, we had a couple of episodes dedicated to both of the topics of purpose, where it comes to just the purpose as a human and then purpose as a leader and how you present yourself to the world. Highly recommend that you listen to those episodes. I'll make sure to post the links to all of the previous episodes so you can go ahead and explore more. Well, Tim, it's definitely been an interesting discussion. There's quite a bit to unwrap here. So thank you so much for sharing your views. I look forward to our next episode, which will be part 2 of our new series, Next Steps for Success, where we will delve into the topic of business transformation. And of course, a lot could change from today to next time Tim and I start recording, and we're very well prepared for that. So if you enjoyed our episode and our discussion, please like and comment below. Click that subscribe button to our channel, the third side of the coin on YouTube, and please share our videos. We are doing this all for free, and we're here to just share our knowledge and answer potentially any questions that you might have if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn. Tim, you want to add anything?
No, I think you've covered everything. Please subscribe, click like, share it, do it, whatever you want. Just let people know we're out there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tim, and have a wonderful day.